So there's a rousing beginning to this evening's event. Thank you for being with us tonight. Of course, that was Daniel on the podium with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. We're going to be spending a lot of time talking about the extraordinary documentary that is focused on Daniel, the CBC Gem documentary. It's called Disruptor Conductor. And we're so glad you could be with us tonight. My name is Matthew Loden. I'm the CEO of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. And we've created this little watch party where we hope we can spend a little bit of time talking behind the scenes with some of the key leaders that put this entire project together. The participants in particular are going to be Daniel Bartholomew-Poyser, the conductor, musician, wonderful artist. We're so thrilled that he's a part of a couple of wonderful different orchestras. Sharon Lewis, the documentary director, and also Darcy Gray from Symphony of Nova Scotia. He's the community engagement manager there. And this particular program, this documentary and tonight's watch party is a really wonderful example of how a lot of Canadian orchestras come together on a regular basis. And so between the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and the Symphony of Nova Scotia, we're in this partnership bringing this to the world. If you happen to be in Ontario or maybe on the East Coast of Canada, hello, somewhere else around the world, we send you greetings and we're glad that you're here. We also, on both orchestra websites, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and the Nova Scotia, Symphony of Nova Scotia website, we have a watch party guide that has some great pictures, some great questions. If you want to sit down with friends, family, or whoever it is that might be with you in isolation and talk through it, it's kind of like being in a book club for a documentary. So check that out, download it, it's free. We're also going to be watching this documentary not on this channel afterwards, but we're going to direct you to the CBC website where you can actually see the documentary. And finally, the last bit of housekeeping here is if you have questions, you'll have an opportunity to post your questions and we'll try and get some of them answered later on. Send them, as it says there, through Facebook or through YouTube. So in 2019, Daniel Bartholomew-Poyser came to the Toronto Symphony Orchestra for a young person's concert. And he was the conductor and he basically created the program. And he happened to come with an entire film crew. It was a Canadian-based production company called Iron Bay Media. Our thanks to Byron Wong for all of his incredible work on this documentary and also in many, many other important video moments he's put together with us. And they came and they filmed this concert, and I was in the audience, and I was totally blown away by Daniel's ability to speak with people, to have an immediate rapport. The musicians really loved what he was doing, and the audience felt the kind of energy that came off the podium from just who he is as a person. So we're really thrilled that this entire documentary focuses on his journey to being on the podium of a great orchestra like Symphony of Nova Scotia and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra as well. So with that, let's just go straight to Daniel and talk to him because he's much more interesting than I am.
I don't know about that, Matthew.
So,
Hi, Matthew.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Excellent, excellent.
Good,
so
good,
you are the artist in residence and the community ambassador at Symphony of Nova Scotia and TSO here in Toronto. You're the principal education conductor and community ambassador. Those are some seriously hefty titles. Can you what does that mean for you?
What it means is that I get to do something that I really love, which is, go for coffee with people in the community, find out what they love, and see the intersections between what they love and orchestral music. That's the community ambassador part of it. And then artist in residence with Symphony of Nova Scotia, I'm conducting a lot of ballet, some bigger material. And then with Toronto Symphony Orchestra, what I'll be doing, is the principal education conductor part of it, which is teaching adults, teaching young people, teaching concerts, educational concerts, stuff that I really love based on my career as a teacher before. So here I am, and the community ambassador part, the really fun part about this is having TSO and SNS, getting both organizations working together. That really excited me about this whole project, the Watch Party.
Yeah,
so.
I tell you, I know there's a lot of wonderful networkers out there in the world, but I have to say that you're a pretty extraordinary connector yourself, and what you're able to bring together is really special. And it's clear that with your teaching background, you have found a way to kind of bring that into your daily working life with music. And I wonder how the whole idea of teaching and sharing and helping people to understand, how did that translate into you deciding to be a part of this whole documentary? What was the project genesis?
Well, I think you'll see it in the documentary that a lot of the concerts that I do, for example, the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra, like they have a part of the documentary that you'll see where there's Afrofusion, because that orchestra, SFS, San Francisco, is very, very committed to African music, right? Mm-hmm. So they brought in the drummer from Black Panther. Great. It was a lot of work for them to do that. I wanted our audiences to be able to experience African music and to learn something about the talking drum. Or the concert with Thorgy, I wanted the audiences there to be able to understand a little bit about the LGBTQ history of Canada, right? So the documentary was a great opportunity to do on the screen 3 things that orchestra does really well in a live format. So when people come to an orchestral concert, oftentimes like the 3 main reasons are they will have fun, it will be relaxing, and they will learn something. That is the 3 things that people often say they want from orchestral music. It's fun, it's relaxing, they learn something when they come to a concert. I wanted the documentary to be the same thing. Fun, relaxing, enjoyable, and have people come away saying, oh, I thought about something differently. I learned something new. And that's what I wanted.
Yeah, even with those 3 very succinct kind of things that you wanted to achieve, it strips away what can be a lot of the baggage of a classically organized symphony orchestra. Mm-hmm. You don't always expect to necessarily have fun when you go to the orchestra, in spite of whether, it could be Mozart or Mahler or, African funk. There is still that element of joy and excitement around what the music is saying. And that's one of the things I think you do so admirably. But aside from all the fun stuff, what were some of the challenges of putting this documentary together? There must have been some interesting moments.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. You could call them interesting. It's television. So there has to be conflict. And as a conductor and as a person, when I'm on the podium, I don't want to disrupt. I want everything to go smoothly, and I want to appear confident, and I want to appear always that everything's in control and nothing makes me nervous and I'm unflappable. And Sharon, oftentimes, she said, Daniel, and you'll see this in the documentary, you have to talk about if you're nervous. You have to talk about when the stakes are high. If something goes wrong, you have to say it. And you'll see that in a Thorgy concert. I say something wrong and there's a joke that falls flat. And she's like, she said to me, Daniel, when it's hard for you, when you're at your most upset, that's when we needed you on camera the most. Right?
Wow.
So just being, because you are the leader, so you are in charge, and having to take those moments where I felt nervous or upset or scared or sad, really going there, as Sharon was saying, you'll see that when I'm talking about the coming out story and stuff. That was really hard. That was really, really hard. And I had to talk to one of my great friends, KWS Symphony principal bassoon, Ian. We talk about it a lot. I'd say, Ian, we want me to talk about this and that. And he was like, go for it. So I actually had a lot of support, reading a lot of Brene Brown to be able to be vulnerable and say, okay, this is me world, and this is what I do. This is how I do it. It might not be the usual, but this is me. That was actually the hardest part, for sure, the hardest part.
Wow, that takes a lot of guts, and we're the beneficiaries of those guts. So thank you for that. And it's a great time to ask Sharon some questions. So let's bring her into the conversation. Sharon Lewis is a Gemini Award nominated Canadian actress and director, and is responsible for putting this whole shebang together. Sharon, so why don't you react to a little bit of what was it like to pull those things out of Daniel?
He's so right. The hardest part of the documentary was not actually getting all the unions signed off, the travel to the symphonies. It was getting Daniel to go, hey, you're going to have to show all the behind scenes stress, because that's what attracted me to this documentary and to doing it about Daniel in the first place. I was like, how is this possible that there's this Trinidadian growing up in Calgary, first openly gay Black conductor in Canada who's out there doing all of these things? And I guess in order to get to that place, he was like, everything's got to be in its place, Mm-hmm. And so he really did give over. He started to open up and allow us to see behind the scenes, because I think for anybody who's outside of the orchestral world, like I am, I needed that way in, and I needed him to be the audience's way in. So when he goes to the prison, which is one of the first concerts that he goes to, you can feel his excitement and his passion for breaking down those barriers and those walls, for going in there and bringing music in there that normally those women wouldn't get to hear. And he speaks so eloquently about that. And then he would catch himself And then he kind of like, but when he's there teaching, and you'll see this in the doc, all of that's gone. It's all heart and it's all passion and authenticity. And I think those are some of the things that make for a film, that make a really good film. So he's a wonderful conductor of what we're going to see,
Yeah,
and he's disrupting all the way, let me tell you.
That's an amazing story, because when you think about all the difficulty that people are having right now, either in isolation or with mental health or with anxiety about losing their jobs or frankly losing loved ones to this terrible pandemic, the idea of being in a process where you're in front of people and you're actually required to be vulnerable in order to be successful. There's some powerful learning in all of that, and it occurs to me that performers, they're not necessarily they're designed to pretend like it looks easy. They work really hard at that, right? So kudos to you.
And I would say for me, I set out going, if he can convince me that classical music is for me and that I belong there, then I think we've done our job. And the way that Daniel talks about Mahler, the way that Daniel talks about Beethoven, it's impossible to not get caught up in his love and his passion for that music. And he shares personally some of the grief that he went through and how music helped him get through those moments. And I think that is what we need to hear right now with the police violence going on and the pandemic going on. Music really does heal the soul. And I think Daniel brings that to us in this documentary in all those various settings. We can really feel, he has this beautiful quote where he says, music is beauty and beauty heals the soul. And that, it sums up to me what he's trying to do with his music and what he's trying to do with the Toronto Symphony and the Nova Scotia Symphony.
That's wonderful.
I think now too, as we're in a period where so much is happening, that music heals the soul, but it also restores the soul and rejuvenates the soul in order for the soul, the person, the being, to accomplish the work that they will have to do in the world next. So taking that moment out to have that music feed you, to give you strength for the work, the considerable work that we will have to do and that we are going to be engaging in.
Yeah. Some of the work that you've not only begun, but you've had incredible success with and really lit a bunch of fires is in the element of drag and having Thorgy appear in this first ever orchestra mashup with Thorgy in Nova Scotia. I'd love to hear how that came together and what the journey was like for you, Daniel, just imagining it and then seeing it happen and now knowing that it's happening a lot.
Right. Well, it was the first orchestral drag concert in Canada. I think the first one in the world was with Edwin Outwater in San Francisco Symphony, and he was my mentor with the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. So that idea was kind of out there. Chris Wilkinson, who you'll see at the start of the documentary, they asked him at the start of the documentary, what does a conductor do? And listen to Chris's answer when that question is asked, what does a conductor do? It's very telling. It's great. He called me and him and Eric, our operations manager, said, Daniel, what do you think about this? And it's one of those moments where thinking of Thorgy the drag and what could happen in a concert, and it just went and just locked into place. And I thought, yes, because I knew what Thorgy would bring and I knew what I could bring together. And it was just a matter of details, but I was like, this is an idea that can actually work. And then that the whole concert would be a mix of, which is so important in concert programming, the sweet and the salty. So you have the laughs and the fun, but then also you have the depth and the meaning. You cover all the bases, and how that would be such a healing space in terms of queering the space and saying, yes, we can bring all of our queerness, LGBTQ2+, Two-Spirit, we can bring that to the concert hall, and we can all be here together in a safe space. And at the end of the Toronto, the clip in the documentary where we've just finished the Autism Spectrum concert, I talk about the power of people who had experienced so much of the same life journey being together in the same space. It's galvanizing, and you'll see it in the audience in Nova Scotia. With Symphony Nova Scotia, you'll see that happen in the audience there. And Thorgy and I, since we've been touring the show all over Canada, North America, we've seen it galvanize audiences when you get all these queer people together in the same space, and we are just partying. We're just like, it's great. It's great.
It's great, but let me tell you, Matthew, that was one of the hardest segments to film, because
Really?
you can imagine drag culture and orchestral culture are on two sides of the spectrum in terms of performative aspects, schedules, running
No
late,
clapping in between movements.
Yeah, yeah. But even just getting 4G there, you know, and then getting the orchestra there and getting them on the same page, that was a really beautiful process to watch happen. I mean, she's a classically trained violinist, so you know the talent is there. It's just bringing those two cultures is that they don't easily fit.
Well, one of the things that, you know, in listening to the story of all of this, one of the things that is so important is the kind of organizational leadership that actually makes the decision to allow something like this to not only happen, but to encourage it to happen really, really well. So I'd love to turn to Darcy Gray from Symphony of Nova Scotia. And Darcy, hey, good evening. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for initially bringing all of this to life. It's a pretty extraordinary journey that you've been able to take a lot of people on who never could have imagined that this, not just the drag aspect of it, but that all of the kinds of work that Symphony Nova Scotia does in the community, and that real commitment to taking care of people who are in your space and what that looks like. Tell us a little bit about how that all comes about.
Well, I think for us, and you know, Daniel's a big part of our leadership group on this, of course. It's about being inclusive, being accessible to people who, for whatever reason, whether it's financial or cultural or whatever, don't even think about coming to our concerts, or they can't. So something like the Thorgy Thor show, like Daniel said, it queered the space. We had families there and children in drag, and everybody's just happy to be hanging out and having a good time, and we're all learning something. And we do the same with underprivileged communities. We're an orchestra that serves the province, so we try to reach our rural communities as much as we can, Indigenous communities. And it's creative programming. It's about, like Daniel said earlier, have a coffee with somebody and figure out how you can make that connection between the orchestra world and whatever world that they happen to be in. So there's been some really great things. We've been lucky to work with Daniel for about 5 years now, I think, Daniel, give or take. And Daniel was working with our CEO, Chris Wilkinson, prior to that. So the roots are quite deep right now between what we're doing and and how Daniel's helped us get there. And we're not alone. Orchestras all across the country are doing the same thing. We're all trying really hard to just focus on being part of our community. And that's even more obvious right now. Like you were just saying, you know, we're all struggling because of the coronavirus and all sorts of other things going on, and we can come together. Like I wouldn't have predicted a year ago that I'm sitting here in a joint video chat with Toronto Symphony people, right? Like it's just, I think we're all doing really great work.
Yeah, it's the silver lining in all of this.
Yeah.
I'd love to turn to one of the first questions that we've gotten into us, and it's actually for all three of the panelists. And the question is from Catherine Carlson, who just happens to be the person that runs Orchestras Canada, which is a fantastic advocacy organization across all of Canada. And the question is, what's the first piece you would like to conduct when your orchestras are back on stage together? Let's say that must be for you, Daniel, because I'm not going to answer it.
Okay. The first piece I would like to conduct when we are all back together would be Brahms' Tragic Overture, because it's one of my favorite pieces, and it's one of the reasons that I've become a conductor, is to conduct. You know, I love that piece. So not because it's tragic, but because I just love the music so much. So maybe that's selfish, but that Tragic Overture, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. A Brahms' Tragic Overture, Matthew.
Go ahead.
Or Matthew, maybe Mahler 8. Just putting the bug in your ear there. Just tossing that out there, Matthew. Just think about it.
The ambition,
either or, I'm fine.
The ambitions of a conductor never cease. I love it. That's great. So here's another question we got in for the three of you. What do you see as being the role of orchestras in this century, and particularly post-COVID? What are we going to be doing differently or the same? Let's start with you, Sharon.
Well, you know, what I'll say, it's so lovely that Darcy made that comment that, you know, in the midst of this pandemic, this has been an opportunity for the TSO and the NSS to get together and to do this. And I think we're going to see a lot more collaborations. And really, just before we went live, Daniel was talking about what would it be to conduct, you know, virtually. And I think, you know, there have already been some interesting experiments like that. And there's going to be good out of that and interesting, creative. You know, I'm an artist first, so I think out of any situation, we're going to forge new creative genres or opportunities. So, you know, I love this. Like, even though it's challenging and we're doing this in Zoom, I love this idea that we are trying to invite people in to a collaboration between the TSO and the NSS, and who knows who else we can reach who may not have been able to make it to the concert.
Yeah.
You know, so it's another way to bring in those communities, which is my passion, that feel sometimes marginalized or outside of the orchestral experience.
Yeah, that's very well said. That's really well said. Darcy, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick up on what Sharon was saying. I think in the past, symphony orchestra has been a pretty traditional, slow-moving sort of organization, and what's happened is it's absolutely forced us to think outside the box. How can we? None of us knows if we're going to have a concert in the next however long. So we still want to be relevant in the community. So we have to blow up some of those old models and figure out what we can do. That doesn't mean that when we're allowed to, we're not going to perform Mahler 8, although probably not here in Halifax. I'm not sure we have a room big enough, but it's forcing us to really like push back some of those barriers that we've been working with for the last bunch of years, and that's not a bad thing. So, like you said before, Matthew, the silver lining, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Daniel, let's leave the last word tonight to you on that topic. What are your thoughts?
I think I'm going to speak first specifically about a fact about Symphony Nova Scotia, and the fact is that for the past 2 or 3 years, and you can fact check this, I don't know if it's 2, 3, or 4, for the past 2 or 3 years, the majority of Symphony Nova Scotia's concerts have been sold out. So think about that. For the past 2 or 3 years, the majority of Symphony Nova Scotia's concerts in the series have been sold out. So one, that shows me there's a need and there's a love for orchestral music. Now we can't do that. We can't have our big concerts, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. So these concerts that we are now no longer allowed to have with packed theaters of 1,200 in Nova Scotia, or 3,000, we can't do those anymore. But that was only always and ever just a tip of the iceberg of what a professional orchestra is doing. And you will see that in the documentary. We have a quartet that we take to a prison, a quartet, 4 players. Orchestras are doing stuff like that all the time. All the musicians in an orchestra are doing tons of different things in the community, bringing people together in their different ways with their different talents. Maybe it's teaching, maybe it's incorporating music and music education, or music and music therapy. We're all doing all this stuff. So the big concerts are just the tip of the iceberg. And now all this stuff that's been happening under here, as Darcy said, with our lack of flexibility as a sector, as a group, all of those things now we have to amp up and supercharge them, turbocharge them, and like cars, we're turbocharging them, we're bringing them up to the fore, and we're saying, how can we focus even more on community engagement in small ways? How can we develop stronger and deeper relationships and collaborations with these community organizations? And you know what? All of that is going to continue with us as we come out of COVID over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years. That's going to stay with us, and we will still have that love of orchestral music that made Symphony Nova Scotia's concerts be sold out for the past 2, 3 years. So it is dire now, it is difficult now, but our resourcefulness and our intelligence as a sector is going to take us through, because it's already happening. You're seeing that in the conferences online, and the minds that are coming together, the solutions that are being thought of, and the ingenuity that's being applied to the problems of the current situation. That's going to take us through. So I predict you will see more concerts, big concerts, but also deeper roots in the community through these sorts of collaborations.
That's beautifully said, Daniel. And with that, we'll wave goodbye to the 3 of you and say thank you so much for all you do for the sector and for music lovers everywhere. And in particular, thanks to CBC, to the Symphony of Nova Scotia, and thanks to Sharon and Darcy for being with us tonight. Daniel, who again is the TSO Principal Education Conductor and Community Ambassador, is generously supported by the Barrett Family Foundation, which we so appreciate. We also want to recognize the San Francisco Symphony, who worked hard to secure the rights, as Daniel was mentioning, to include footage from the Black Panther in the documentary. We're going to go to a splash page when I finish talking, so you can see where you can be directed to the CBC Gem documentary. You have to go to a separate website. It's gem.cbc.ca, as you can see right there. One final mention is that the TSO and the SNS, both organizations spend a lot of time celebrating Pride, and that, of course, is coming up later in the month of June. Pay attention to both orchestra social media channels, and otherwise we'll have a lot of Pride-focused content there, and hope that you'll be a part of that. We miss being with people. We miss being able to share the music that is so important to us to make and to communicate and to tell our stories around. But we know that we'll be back together at some point soon. So meanwhile, thank you for supporting live music in Canada. Please take care of yourselves, take care of your local orchestras, and we'll see you soon. Be well.